Welcome to the Thom Hartmann program. I am Alex Lawson, filling in for Thom. It is Friday, October 21st, 18 days until the election, or 17 days, 11 hours, 53 minutes, and 46 seconds if you are counting. And man, am I happy that this is, we're getting closer. I think there's now 2 more Fridays before the election. So I'm really looking forward to the show. Anything Goes Friday, so I want to hear from you all. Call in. And right now, I have the distinct pleasure of being joined in studio by Daniel Marans, a crack reporter at the Huffington Post. And Daniel, thanks for joining us.
Great to be here, Alex.
And obviously, Daniel, I think all of your reporting on Social Security, on you're one of the few people who can actually tell the story in a way that is really comprehensible to folks and is telling the truth about what's going on. It's sometimes very difficult for people in D.C. to tell that story because there's so many, there's so much disinformation. I should say I've literally spent 2 days with the listeners on Thom's show, talking about Social Security, the debate, and taking calls. And outside of D.C., it's a almost near unanimous understanding of the situation around Social Security. It's really only here in D.C. and New York, I say it's the greedy liars on Wall Street and their minions in D.C. that have this other point of view. So I really love your journalism on it, even when, I think you're maybe being too fair, like you won't call them greedy liars on Wall Street, for example, but you're covering the issues and you can count on your reporting to show that there has been this remarkable change, and you've been covering it so long enough that you've actually watched that whole thing happen. And I think that the debate, and you wrote about this last night, I think the debate was it's a watershed type moment. I mean, it really showed that the center of the Democratic Party has moved. So tell us about the piece that you just put up yesterday in regards to the debate.
Well, what's remarkable about the debate is not just that Hillary Clinton came firmly down against any benefit cuts and even said that she would enhance benefits, particularly for vulnerable groups, but that Donald Trump was not eager to answer the question at all, which suggests that he understands how toxic it is to even embrace a kind of balanced plan that would have included some cuts and revenue increases, the so-called grand bargain template. And for him to dodge on that, turn it into, oh, we're going to cut taxes and grow the economy, and therefore that'll be enough to help Social Security, which has a kernel of truth in the sense that that could add a year. I mean, if you did the strategies that actually generated economic growth, it can add a year or two here and there to solvency, but mostly it was a dodge. And that would not be something that we would be used to hearing from a Republican standard bearer. This is the kind of thing that when I hear my liberal elite technocratic type friends in circles in the country, many of them even sometimes who vote Republican in normal elections, but are very much from the more business-friendly wing of the party, and they're scratching their head at the Trump phenomenon. What does he really represent other than just some racist, mouth-breathing segment of the population? And I think obviously there are many tropes, and some of them are harder to reconcile with progressive goals than others. But one of the things that kind of middle and working class white Americans who are attracted to Trump's message, certainly based on previous studies of these types of groups, is the idea that Social Security is something that they paid into, and Medicare is as well, that these are programs that they don't perceive to be handouts to freeloaders. And sometimes when you talk to people, even if they have those views, the rhetoric can be nasty, it can be couched in all kinds of different things, but those same types of people who have this deep sense of unfairness or resentment about the current immigration process, about trade, this is another one of those areas where they feel that way. And so I think one of the takeaways for this kind of liberal technocratic set is, if you do want to get more in touch and you're claiming that this is something that is important to you, that the country is sort of splitting at the seams, and we need to find a way to understand these people that just appear to be really rabid and livid in their anger at elites, then maybe this is a uniting trope.
Yeah, I wouldn't call Social Security a trope. It's just a uniting thing. I mean, we have polling data. I always bring up the Pew one. It was to study polarization, and it found that, yes, indeed, increasing polarization basically across the board, except on one thing, Social Security.
Right.
No one wants to cut Social Security except for greedy liars on Wall Street and their minions here in D.C., and then people who've fallen for the disinformation. I look at, I don't give Trump any benefit of the doubt. I just say he used, Democratic talking points, like progressive talking points, to get through the primary.
Right.
But he's a very normal Republican. He sends his little guys out to make sure that the greedy liars know that he will too cut Social Security.
He just appears to have an ear for the public that is a little bit more finely tuned. I think he understood, for example, that the Reagan coalition of working class white Americans, so-called Reagan Democrats who once upon a time voted for Democrats, married to social conservatives and the business wing of the party, was always an awkward marriage, and that tension had finally reached a fever pitch, and he just exploited it and pulled it apart.
And that the K Street Republicans, the Romney Republicans, are very, very few in number, and that's another thing. What I also see is him recognizing, we're focused on him. I'll get to Hillary Clinton, but I believe, in the progressive movement, have shifted the entire landscape under people's feet when it comes to Social Security. So that actually does move. It moves all Democrats from okay with some cuts to no cuts, some Democrats to expansion, and moves some Republicans to no cuts. And that's the future that I see, is where Republicans, who their base do not want their Social Security benefits cut, right? That's why they always use code words when they talk about it. And so in the future, I believe what the dynamic we will see is actually between Democrats, who are going to be pushing to expand and increase benefits, and Republicans, who are going to be saying, no, we're going to try to keep it where they are. And that's, going to be the dynamic in the future.
Well, it certainly should be interesting to watch. I can't make any predictions for certain, but I think it is true that you saw the debate move, and what you saw from Clinton on Wednesday night was, in fact, as you say, evidence of a real pressure campaign on her, and specifically at a moment after she had lost the New Hampshire primary in February, where Social Security Works, the Progressive Campaign Change Committee, a number of other liberal groups really asked for clarity on her position. She had previously said that she wanted to enhance benefits, which, for those who observe the program for a long time, know often goes hand in hand with major benefit cuts for the middle class. The Bowles-Simpson formula gives kind of a lip service, some relatively minor and insubstantial increases for the lowest earners at the expense of major cuts for middle income earners. So she then came down explicitly on that in February, and we saw that.
And that is, she said she's in support of enhance, but, I can speak in the first person. We said that's not enough because of what you just laid out. We also need no cuts in there. Right. Then she got at, she said she'd already been there, and she now supports absolutely no benefit cuts and expanding benefits in a targeted manner. And then that's been in her stump speech. It's on her website. Right. It's in her policy book. Tim Kaine talks about it as well. And at the same time, actually, a little bit at the exact same time, President Obama, who impaneled the BS Commission in the first place, he had to change course. And he's now at expand Social Security. And I don't think it is at all a stretch to say that is the new center of the Democratic Party. And I know you can speak to this. That question from Wallace was designed to be very, very difficult for, I mean, Hillary Clinton is where she is in the Democratic Party. In 2013, she would be right where President Obama was.
Right. So
that question was designed.
We know from WikiLeaks that she told a Brazilian bank, I believe it was Morgan Stanley. She said, Bowles-Simpson is the right framework.
Right, which was what all elite Democrats were saying at the time. That idea was where they were.
But one of the interesting things, sort of there's this critique of Hillary Clinton that she's very responsive to public sentiment. That can be a critique, or it can be something to be taken advantage of, because she is eager to prove her bona fides once she becomes aware of something like that.
I don't understand it as a critique that much. I mean, as long as she changed her position in the direction of what the people were demanding. And I'm like, that's good. I think that politicians should listen to the people.
There's no question it's going to be difficult for her to walk back.
Yes, and that's what I want you in the last couple minutes here. That question was like, I mean, he referenced the CRFB, this Peterson-funded propaganda shop, in my words, and the question was the grand bargain. That would have been very difficult last presidential cycle for a Democrat to actually say no to. And she said no benefit cuts. And in fact, I support expansion.
That question, like Elaine Quijano's question in the vice presidential debate, framed it as if the only potential problem with retirement security right now is the financial solvency of Social Security, not that it's playing an increasingly important role in providing as a source of income. It used kind of a crisis framing, that this is an emergency, and if you don't have a plan to do this and to embrace benefit cuts, which might be inimical to you to do it, then you're not really, quote, serious. I mean, that was the implication of Wallace's question, 100%. And to your point, in terms of how this would have played out in a previous Democratic debate, we already know. Because that was one of President Obama's most damaging moments in the eyes of the progressive movement.
There's really not much of a difference between.
Was that he downplayed his differences with Mitt Romney on the issue of Social Security. This might be something where we actually have something in common.
And just what Hillary Clinton did in front of, I don't know how many people watching, it's like 80 million or something. That was because more people watched the third than the second debate. That was a very big deal. And, I think it's important to note that stature of she was asked very directly, this old elite Democratic or bipartisan position, will you, promise that this is the path that you're going to go down? And it was just this, oh, please, no.
It was, would you consider a grand bargain that included both benefit cuts and revenue increases to restore Social Security and Medicare solvency? And I would add that the New York Times editorial page even set the stage a little bit further by claiming that she had left room open to that. In the day before in an editorial, and effectively saying, we like that she's for expanding, we like that she's against all these various benefit cuts, but we agree that she needs to maybe compromise with Republicans if it came down to it.
And she said no. And that's the new center of the Democratic Party. And I think that is big news. We're going to stick with Daniel. He's going to take calls with me. So stick around. You're listening to the Thom Hartmann program. I'm Alex Lawson, filling in for Thom.
This is the Thom Hartmann program.
We're going to take your calls right after this. Welcome back to the Thom Hartmann program. I'm Alex Lawson, filling in for Thom, and I am going to jump right to the phones here. I'm going to take, I'm trying to go in order. I'm going to take Ed in Klamath Falls. Ed, you're on the line with me and Daniel Marans.
Oh, hi. I have a question about Social Security. It seems like I started paying into Social Security in about 1967, and when I did, they were using a market basket to determine our cost of living increases. Then I noticed in 1971, they decided, oh, we're doing away with the market basket. How can they do that? I mean, it's an insurance program. I have a contract with an insurance company when they take my money. what's up?
That Ed is a great question. I think you're very right in that it is an insurance program and you've paid into it. The problem with the COLA, though, is actually that the market basket is too old at this point. It's based on an old indicator, the CPIW, that only really measures the costs faced by workers, which are really different than the costs faced by retirees, by those on fixed incomes. And so what we really need to do is update the basket to something that more accurately reflects the cost faced by folks who are receiving Social Security benefits. I'll turn it over to Daniel. I know because right now we need to do that. That's going to take some time. But right now, people need more money in their pocket. They got no COLA this year. They're going to get 0.3% next year. And we have an opportunity is the Save Benefits Act, which is sponsored by Elizabeth Warren in the Senate and Tammy Duckworth in the House. And there really is an opportunity in the lame duck to pass this bill. It's a one-time payment paid for by closing a tax loophole that was identified by Republicans. So I really, Ed, if you could call your members of Congress at 202-225-3121 and tell them to get on board with the Save Benefits Act. And we have an opportunity to try to move that in the lame duck this year. But Daniel, do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, it's interesting. So the Bureau of Labor Statistics, which has developed these market baskets to measure price increases, has actually something that's an experimental look at what a basket specifically designed for the elderly population would look like. And it's called the Consumer Price Index for the elderly, but it's as yet experimental. It really basically takes the normal basket and weights a few things more differently. But this year, had that been the basis for the cost of living adjustment for Social Security, then it would have, then beneficiaries will be receiving something like at least 1.2% of a raise. The exact number escapes me, but that would be a much bigger difference for people. And so for people who personally are experiencing, for example, rising drug price costs or housing, for example, those are two areas, housing and healthcare in particular, where the population that tends to receive Social Security has a very, very different budget.
And drug prices are going up on average 10% a year. Medical inflation is at 5% a year. So 0.3% is just not keeping up with it. Ed, thanks so much for your call. I want to move to the CPIE, but I think we might want to go bigger than that even. You're listening to the Thom Hartmann program. I'm Alex Lawson, filling in for Thom Hartmann. We're going to take more of your calls right after this. Welcome back to the Thom Hartmann program. I am Alex Lawson, filling in for Thom. Daniel Marans is sticking around in studio for more of your calls. Reporter at Huffington Post on multiple things, but especially on Social Security. One of the best reporters out there. You really should go check him out. Daniel Marans at the Huffington Post. I want to get to... I'm trying to go in order here. So Michael in Imperial Beach. Michael, you're on the line with Daniel and I.
Hey, Alex and Daniel. Didn't get to write my question out. This is pretty quick, but I was wondering, a lot of the Trump supporters are religious people, evangelicals, et cetera, et cetera. Now, everybody gets the benefits of Social Security. So I was wondering, and this sort of doesn't get on Social Security, but it does, do churches pay any wages into Social Security? Because I know they get benefits from the government as tax exemptions. And could you please explain in depth about what the tax cap on Social Security is? People, who make, $900 million a year, how much they pay as a percentage of their income, as do the average working person. Thank you.
Michael, that's a great question. So the shortest answer is on employees of any church, which is going to be a nonprofit entity or anything. Any employees are paying in to Social Security through FICA contributions. They're paying into the system, and it'll be there for them when they need it. I might toss the wage. The cap question over to Daniel, but I wanted to just riff on something on the evangelicals and the faith aspect really quickly, because then I'm going to give Daniel the last minute here. I think that the Social Security is a moral issue, right? We pay into it; it's ours, and if anyone's trying to cut the benefits, they're stealing from us, and everybody should be against that, especially people of faith who understand that obligation. Daniel, we only got about 45 seconds here on the cap.
Sure.
Can you explain that?
Well, in 2016, it was $118,500. Next year, it's going to be a little bit more than 120, and that means that 6.2% that you pay in, folks that make more than that money only pay in on that initial amount. There's some historical reasons for it, but many people who want to fix the program's finances without cutting benefits would like to lift that cap.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann program. I'm Alex Lawson filling in. We will be right back.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann program. Call 202-808-9925.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann program. I'm Alex Lawson filling in for Thom, and we will be right back with more of your calls after this break.